Today is Monday, April 8th, and this is Celtics Beat on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio-video coverage of the Boston Celtics. I'm Adam Kaufman, and episode 309, featuring Celtics radio broadcaster Sean Grande, is brought to you by betonline.ag. Get a 50% bonus on your first deposit by going to betonline.ag/CelticsBeat and using the promo code CLNS50 at checkout. Today's show also brought to you in part by Robinhood. Robinhood's giving listeners a free stock to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. All right, let's jump in. Welcome back. Good to be back with you. Thanks to Evan Valenti for filling in the last couple of weeks while I was off at Disney World. It truly was a magical time. But you know what? So are the playoffs. And there's one game left in the NBA's regular season for the Celtics. Tuesday in Washington. Doesn't matter one little bit. Brad Stevens has already said his starters won't play much, if at all, following Sunday's I don't know, I'm not going to say crushing, but certainly injury-plagued loss to the Magic. The C's are locked into the fourth seed in a first-round matchup with the Pacers, which, by the way, I think is a good thing. Put off the Raptors until the conference finals if the Celts can get there and the Raps are still around. I know the Bucks, they have the best record in the league. They're very, very good. That's underselling them. They're great. There's still a better matchup. We saw that last year without Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward, and some guys like Giannis Antetokounmpo were playing at another level. Again, well aware of this, but I'm not saying the Celtics would beat the Bucks, but I like that matchup better than I do that of the Raptors. And Irving, Hayward, they are both healthy. Of course, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, they're banged up. Tad injury to insult with that defeat to Orlando. But we'll get to all that. Preview the first round series with the Pacers that starts at the Garden this weekend. Take your Twitter questions if we have time, and a whole lot more. All right, let's waste no time. Let's bring in Celtics radio play-by-play man, Sean Grande. Sean, how you been? Been a while.
It has been a while, although, for me, I'm currently reading my son the Chronicles of Narnia. We're about halfway through it.
Okay.
And for those that are not familiar with it, it's basically about a fantasy land that these kids tumble into. I won't do spoiler alerts or anything. But when they cross back and forth, no time has passed. So if they come back into, to Earth, into a regular human world, it doesn't matter if they've been gone for years. No time has passed. The NBA season is like one long day.
That's true.
It really, there's no days of the week. It's a plane to a hotel, to a game, to home, to laundry, to whatever. So it's one long day. So basically, in some ways, it feels like I've been gone for years, and in other ways, it's like October was, yesterday.
Yeah, complete and utter blur all the time, as we all know who follows this team, and you're much closer to it, obviously, than the vast majority of the rest of us. But one thing that you do get to do that I know we're all jealous of, you get to spend a whole lot of quality time with Cedric Maxwell, and we got a ton to cover in this show, and we'll do it. But I do want to begin with this because I had your partner on the show last month. I asked him for a funny story that not a lot of people have heard, and this is what he said.
When the Celtics won the championship, and it was 08 or
08.
I had a buddy of mine who had went out and was hanging out at a place. He was partying, and he sees this woman, and she was like had Celtic paraphernalia on. So he looks at her and he said, "Hey, you love the Celtics?" She said, "I love the Celtics." She said, he said, "Man," she said, one of my best friends is Cedric Maxwell." And she said, "Oh my God." She said, "I love the Celtics, and I used to love Cedric Maxwell. I don't like him anymore." She's like, "You don't like him anymore?" She's like, "Oh, why?" And the woman says, "He's gay." And my buddy said, "He's not gay." She said, "No, yes, he is gay. I saw him on." She said, "Why did he say that?" "I saw him on Phantom Gourmet, and he said him and his partner went out to have something to eat." I was talking about Sean Grande. So I can leave you with that one.
I can't think of a better way to end the show.
I might be gay, but Sean Grande is not going to be my type. Okay, I can tell you that.
Your response, sir?
I'm hurt that I'm not his type.
Yeah, well, that's what I said to him. I said he might like you.
Well, I'd point out, if on the other side of that coin, I'd point out that him and I are the longest relationship either one of us has ever had.
That's fair.
So, in full disclosure and fairness, we've had each other's phone. I think my phone number maybe I've had since 1998, my cell phone number. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty much been It's funny because he stole that story for so many years. It's you realize as time changes, that story becomes it's not the story. It's like the person in it, the woman in it. It's a lot less PC than it used to be.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Stories go by from time to time. He tells a very funny story, which I won't go into now, about a woman saying something to him in Whole Foods, which was very sort of innocent and probably just a random white person in Whole Foods kind of story. Very innocent about something that this woman said to him, but even now you have to be so, which is really, again, it's a longer podcast conversation about just the time that he and I have been together, and especially the way, not so much we talk, extemporaneously, I'll cover issues, but the way Max talks, he has to be, it's a different game now than it used to be as far as things you can say because of how they're, not because of what they mean, but how they're interpreted. It comes up it's funny, we passed the 10th anniversary of the Violet Palmer thing a couple of years ago. And you realize now, on the one hand, it sort of would have been a bigger thing than it was, given social media, given everybody looking for his crazy stories and whatever.
Sure.
On the other hand, people actually would have paid attention to what it was, and they would have played the tape, and it wouldn't have been nearly the same thing because everyone. But it was back in 2007. It was more like a rumor. Did he really say that? And how did he say it? And what did it mean? Whereas now, everyone would have had the tape 10 seconds later.
Yeah, immediately.
Everyone would have been running it on Twitter, and they would have said, oh, he was making fun of Tommy and whatever. And it would have been so you realize everything, for better or worse, regardless, would be viewed through a different prism now in the things that you say.
All right, well, let's get to some of the important stuff as it relates to this team. The playoffs, they're just about here. I mean, effectively they are because, as we know, the last game doesn't mean anything. So this year...
Don't tell it to TNT. It's going to be one of those players-only telecasts.
Oh, that'll be...
study up on P.J. Dozier and R.J. Hunter.
Yeah, that'll be excruciating. What is this? What year is this now for you broadcasting these games with this team?
This is 21 in the league and 18 with the Boston Celtics. I've been very fortunate because I happened to come at the end of Sunday night. Orlando ended a playoff drought. They hadn't been in the playoffs in 7 years.
Right.
And they clinched in Boston. And my first year here, we had a game at TD Garden. The Celtics beat the Lakers to clinch their first playoff spot in 7 years. So it's funny how things go. But the Celtics, in the time I've been here, in the 18 years, you don't think of it this way. This is the 15th year they've made the playoffs. The Spurs are the only team, because they've been in every year, the Spurs are the only team that have been to the playoffs more than the Celtics in the 18 years I've been here.
So I'm glad you said that because I was going to ask you. So 15 out of 18. Now, most people obviously don't feel as strongly about Boston going into the postseason as they did back in training camp when fans and players alike were buying into everything that was said or written about this team, and it was a foregone conclusion they were going to reach the NBA Finals. But how would you compare how you feel about this team entering the playoffs as compared to maybe some other years?
Well, I think, for the most part, it's a different question than it was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, or maybe it's hard to say now because we're too close to it where we're going to draw first of all, it depends on what happens, where we draw the dividing line as to when the season started to turn a little bit, because they did have some games they kicked away at the end. But are we going to talk about, the game at Golden State maybe? It's funny because, as we talked, they haven't played the Washington game yet. If the Celtics win in Washington, they'll have you can picture how this tweet is going to look already, having been obsessed with my Twitter account, who I follow, and following it as diligently as you do.
That's true.
There's a symmetry in a season that has been remarkably up and down and unstable. If the Celtics win in Washington on Tuesday night, their record for the season, it will start 10-10. It will end 14-14, and with 25-9 in the middle. Which, if you're a hardcore Celtics historian, you realize there's a similarity there to 2010, except where they were dominant was in the first third of the year, as opposed to the middle one. But there was a dominant third of the season in which they were as good as anybody in the NBA, if not the best team, and then they were a 500 team the rest of the year. And that's exactly the way this team is playing out, where they were the dominant team, the best team in the league in the middle third of the year, playing 500 around it. And we know, obviously, the 2010 team had a double-digit lead in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. I think the Celtics are what we expect them to be going in. They're the dangerous wild card. One of the real discussion topics that Max and I were talking about on Sunday, because it's a discussion topic, so talking about it is what you do, that isn't it amazing that the Celtics spent the entire year chasing, Milwaukee was always going to be too far to catch. But everyone had angst about catching Philadelphia and Toronto, right? Are they going to catch Philadelphia? Are they going to catch Toronto, 2 seed, 3 seed? Are they going to catch those teams? And obviously they fell short and didn't do it. And the irony is, the way it all plays out, Indiana is the team you'd want. Philadelphia and Toronto have a much tougher first round, the way it's looking right now, with Orlando and Brooklyn playing as well as they're playing. And if you could pick a team, we don't know as we're talking, we don't know who that 8th team is going to be, but if you could pick one to play in the first round, you're probably picking Indiana. So, and then going into the second round, you're going to have to play tough. You're going to have to beat Milwaukee and Toronto to get to the finals anyway. So, I think that you have to feel that the Celtics it's going to be very difficult to beat Milwaukee and Toronto on the road. But to do that, the Celtics have at least with a healthy Kyrie Irving. Remember, they didn't win anything on the road last year. They won one road game last year, and that was in overtime. In Philadelphia, if Bellinelli doesn't have his toe on the line, the Celtics don't win a road game in the playoffs last year, whereas we've known all along this year that we're going to have to do it. And a healthy Celtics team with a healthy Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward playing as well as he's played all year, they certainly are going to have a puncher's chance. And I know this is a long answer, but I'll put it this way. This was a year defined to me by how everyone was so in love with this team in October. In love with this team. They were so ready to go berserk at the start of the year, crazy, head over heels in love with this team. By the middle of the year, towards the end, you were in the Garden. It was a feeling of, sitting on your hands, show me, we've been burned a lot by this team, and not a good feeling about it. And yet, if the Celtics, let's assuming they're going to beat Indiana, they go to Milwaukee and they get one of those first 2 games, when you come back to Boston for Game 3 in a 1-1 series, if that happens, everything will be completely forgotten. It is going to be absolutely insane on that night. All the bad feelings, all the bad nights, all of that will go away if the Celtics can obviously beat Indiana and then steal one of those first 2.
Let's take a quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by betonline.ag. Lots of good NBA games coming up this week to throw some money on. Not too many left with the regular season almost over. The Celtics are in Washington, as you know, on Tuesday. You could bet on the C's money line. The Celts plus 1,200 to win the NBA title as well. Just something to think about, a little forward thinking. Not a bad bet if you're a diehard fan looking to make some money during the postseason. Go to clnsmedia.com/CelticsBeat to get a 50% bonus when you sign up and use the promo code CLNS50. Don't be left on the sideline with all this excitement going on the court. Plus, you can play in BetOnline's virtual casino and make some money there, too. Plus, you always have futures bets you can play. MLB season's in full swing. Let's not talk about the Red Sox at the moment. And NFL futures already out as well. Whatever you do, make sure you use betonline.ag and use the promo code CLNS50 for a 50% bonus on your first deposit, or just go to clnsmedia.com/CelticsBeat. Let's get back to Sean. Well, and to that point, and you skip this team is totally detestable stage that existed throughout a fair chunk of the season as well.
That more in my timeline. I hate this team. I don't like this team. I get it, but we don't know what this team's story is yet. If they have a flame out in the next couple of weeks and they lose to Indiana, it will go down as one of the least liked teams. Obviously, I think that for better or worse, the love affair with this team has a lot to do with the on-court, off-court year that Kyrie had, certainly, if you trace because you had the all-time high of people being in love with this team in the preseason, and then Kyrie says, I'm staying.
Right.
And obviously the year just took turns that, I was a person, obviously I didn't think they would win 49 or 48 games or whatever it turns out to be, but I certainly was not a 60-win person like a lot of people were. I thought the number would be similar to last year, probably with a better scoring differential, which it turns out they had, even with all the extra losses. Because I knew, all the problems. To me, the 14-4, whatever it turns out to be, the last third of the season is what surprised me, not the first third. All those the bad losses that happened in March, or from February into March, whatever. That is really the only part of the season that surprised me. That to me was the difference between the 48, 49 wins and the 55.
Based on all of that, I think I know how you'll answer this question anyway, and of course, based on how closely I follow you, as you noted, if you're a betting man. Does this team have a better chance of losing in the first round of the playoffs or reaching the NBA Finals?
I would say the odds of both are remote. I would say that mathematically and all the Nate Silver projections and the BPI stuff and the stuff that I love it all. I understand the math based on it, but this is a Celtics success or failure this year is not math-based. It's completely emotional, and issues that you can't project with a computer. I would say the numbers now for the Celtics are probably less than 10% to get to the finals, which certainly is more than fair given the road they have to have. I think those numbers are very close. I really do not expect – I'm a big fan of Nate McMillan. I love Sabonis. Miles Turner is a really good defensive player. They're physical. Their game lends itself to the playoffs because they play physical. But when you just look – when you take the snapshot, the Pacers had a similar – they're similar in some ways to the 2013 Celtics, that last run of they weren't the big three anymore because Ray Allen was gone, but it was the Rondo and Jason Terry, that 2013 team, which was more of a basketball museum team. It's like, hey, come see Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce in their natural state for one last run. They lose Rondo, and they actually played better for a while. They stayed afloat, and they won a lot of games. And there's a lot of reasons for that, too. Rondo's a whole separate podcast. But the reality of not having Rondo and not having Ray Allen, and eventually that caught up to them. And you knew when they got to the playoffs, against Raymond Felton and that Knicks team that was pretty good, reality is going to settle in here. And I think that's what's happened with Indiana. And as I said, I think it's just the Pacers are not playing well right now. So I would be, even with all the issues the Celtics have had, it would be pretty surprising to me that if Indiana were to win. Like I said, if you were to pick a team, all right, pick your opponent in the playoffs. Remember last year, by the way, and this happened, Milwaukee got burned last year. Remember Milwaukee said, we want to play Boston, Chris Middleton and a couple of guys. And you know what? I appreciated Middleton saying that. To me, that wasn't a bulletin board thing. That was someone being honest for once. Because the Celtics didn't have Kyrie Irving. Marcus Smart got hurt. Daniel Tice got hurt. Of course you'd want to play. If you're Milwaukee last year, of course you would have wanted to play Boston if you had to play a top four. And right now, Indiana's banged up. Collison's situation's kind of up in the air. It's a tough place to play, Indiana, on the road. But there certainly is the Celtics are playing as well as they've played since the middle of the year. Maybe you could argue in some ways better as far as the pieces fitting together. I'd be surprised on both. I think Indiana would have the same puncher's chance that the Celtics would have of beating. I think the Celtics can beat Milwaukee. I think they can beat Toronto. To do it both back-to-back on the road, that would be an accomplishment that would certainly match what I thought was the best six-game run I've seen now that we've covered. It's been 18 years and I'm old. The best six-game run, you know what I'm going to say, for the Celtics in this 18 years I've been here, the last three games against Cleveland and the first three games in Orlando in 2010. Rondo was a big part of that. But that six-game stretch right there, to me, is as well as they play. That's the most amazing stretch. It's going to take something like that. You're going to have a repeat of that. Although if I'm Toronto right now, I'm thinking more about please don't have Orlando land in the seventh spot because that's a bad matchup. And you've got all the ghosts. If Orlando ever gets one of those first two games up there, especially the first game, that could be a ugly situation.
Well, we've seen a number of Celtics teams during that new Big Three era especially fall short on account of injury. Now, Brad has said a number of times, really this applies to any team, but still he has highlighted it. The most important thing for his team going into the playoffs is health. And, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, both banged up, and unfortunately in what was a generally meaningless game. They do have about a week to rest, so that's good. Jaylen Brown, he's back, looked good from his return after a three-game absence, but he's not 100%, not like anybody is right now. But in particular, Smart, we know what a difference maker he is. We've seen it. We saw it in the playoffs last year. We see it all the time, especially this year in the regular season. And now that he can shoot, that's a whole other level. There were initial reports of an oblique strain, and then Brad said bruise. Either way, as we sit here and chat right now, are you concerned?
I think you have to be, especially it just had that Sunday night had a very bizarre feel because the Celtics are playing great. They're coming off this. They destroy Indiana. Then they clinch home court because Indiana loses. And all of a sudden you had an awkward feel. The first thing I asked Brad on Sunday when we first talked, and it was an off-the-air question, we were just talking about – I was trying to get a feel for what his plan was if Indiana had lost because no one was really anticipating that. You don't think at the start of a day, wait a minute, Indiana's playing at 5 o'clock and the Celtics are playing at 7:30. And then when that happens – all of a sudden you realize, okay, now this game is meaningless. Do you want to change? And I think the approach going in was he wanted to play that game out as if both teams were playing at the same time. And then you realize a quarter into it, geez, all of a sudden everybody's out there, and this is a completely meaningless game. And then Tatum gets hurt, and you're like, man, we should get everybody to the point where I remember saying with when they were down 14 in the fourth quarter that maybe it's time to get everybody out.
Yeah,
and then eventually
bubble
Kyrie
wrap.
came back in. Al Horford didn't, but that was sort of the feeling. Was I'm not. It was a weird feeling that you start going in with a mindset of this is an important game, let's win it and clinch home court, and you realize very early in the game this is now suddenly a meaningless game, which it wasn't for Orlando, and you just don't want bad things to happen. I think you're concerned because look at how that Milwaukee series was going until Marcus Smart came back last week.
Well, once the playoffs do start, let's just, for the sake of argument, presume health. How deep do you expect him to go with his rotations, or is it maybe matchup dependent? Because looking at the roster, he almost has to go at least 9 deep, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think he will. I think it is matchup dependent. I think, Aaron Baines is going to be really important. I don't think there's any question about that. Maybe more important against Indiana than he would be against Milwaukee. And just to finish that thought, by the way, on going to the finals, you've seen it too, because you're on social media, you're talking to fans, you get the feeling. If you ask 10 Celtic fans about which seed they wanted, 3 or 4,
yeah,
that probably all 10 would say the 4 seed.
Right.
And everybody is answering the same question. They're like, oh, well, yeah, we want Milwaukee in the second round. And my thought has been, do you? Really? Have you seen Milwaukee play this year? I know they're a little banged up right now, but eventually they're going to get Brogdon back, and certainly by the second round they're likely to get Brogdon back. And the point is, I don't think people are really understanding how good Milwaukee is, how historically good their season has been. And all the things I hear said about Milwaukee are the same things I heard said about Golden State in 2015 when they had the great regular season, but nobody believed in them in the playoffs because they hadn't seen it yet. And they got the best player in the league right now, and I just think this idea of be careful what you wish for, that the Celtics have struggled in Toronto. The other side of that coin is that they're due to win a game in Toronto. One of my favorite stats is that Brad Stevens has the same number of wins in the UK and in Mexico that he does in Canada in the 6 years. But it's not that I'm not, I think Toronto has some issues. I think Philadelphia obviously has some issues. Milwaukee has some banged up guys. I don't think they have issues as a team, and I think that people are just assuming, well, let's get Milwaukee as opposed to Toronto, and my thought is, be careful what you wish for.
Well, Celtics took 3 of 4. Obviously, they need to face the Pacers first. They took 3 of 4 from Indiana during the regular season, including a pair in the last couple of weeks. Gordon Hayward just shared his thoughts on facing his hometown team.
Yeah, they're a tough opponent, especially they play really well at home, move the ball, physical on defense. They cause turnovers, so we're going to have to take care of the basketball and make sure we get good shots, and it'll be a good series. I'm excited for it. It's good that we got a chance to kind of see what they're about, kind of get ourselves ready a little bit with what they like to do. I know they're going to be different, though, than the last 2 times we played them. Definitely going to play better than the last time, and it'll be a tough series, so we got to be ready.
You can always find Cel's Locker Room Sound on the CLNS YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe there. But, Sean, what should the team take from those 2 meetings in the last, as right now we chat, I think 10 days into this first-round series?
I think the number one thing is the physical element and the way they play. And that, remember, I thought the game on Friday night was officiated like a playoff game. And I think the Celtics were getting pushed around. And when that game was close, once the Celtics stopped getting pushed around, obviously you saw the difference between how these 2 teams are playing right now, and there was a huge separation between them. But they got bullied a little bit early, and there were some, like looking over at the officials, like, are you going to make that call? Are you not? And in the playoffs it's going to lean in the other direction. So I think the Celtics have to answer that. As I said, I think Aaron Baines is going to be really important, and as he has been. The Celtics this year, when Aaron Baines, when he plays less than 15 minutes, they're under 500 this year. So those numbers, I think, are gonna play out. I think that where Indiana, obviously, here's no-brainer 101 without Victor Oladipo, blah blah blah. But especially in the playoffs, if you don't have that guy that can score 10 points in a row and can get you a shot, create his own offense and get you a shot. Of course, we were saying this about the Celtics last year, and then Jason Tatum ended up, doing some of that. But if you don't have that guy, it's really difficult when you're playing the same team over and over and over again. And listen, the Pacers have surprised everybody in the second half of the year, and maybe they surprise people and make this a really tough, long, competitive series. But I'll say two things. If that happens, I don't expect it to happen, is number one. Number two, if it does happen, then that to me is the indicator about what would happen next, because I don't think the Celtics can play a 7-game series here, as they did last year, survive in the final 2 minutes of a gritty, tough, physical, long 7-game series, and then think that they're going to go on Milwaukee and Toronto. I think this has to be what the last 2 weeks have been. I think this needs to be a get your mojo back, 5-game type series win if the Celtics are going to do anything. I think this series will indicate whether the Celtics are really a threat, to pull off these upsets in the East.
One last break to tell you, today's program also brought to you by Robinhood. Robinhood's an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, cryptos, all commission-free. While other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, Robinhood doesn't charge any commission fees, so you can trade stocks and keep all your profits. Plus, there's no account minimum deposit needed to get started. You can just start investing at any level. The simple, intuitive design of Robinhood makes investing easy for newcomers and experts alike. View easy-to-understand charts and market data and place a trade in just 4 taps on your smartphone. That's it. You can also view stock collections, such as the 100 most popular, if that's something you're into. With Robinhood, you can learn how to invest in the market as you build your portfolio. Discover new stocks, track your favorite companies, get custom notifications for price movements so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving listeners of Celtics Beat a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build that portfolio. So sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. Get back to the show. Well, Hayward seems to have his mojo back, or like Stella, got his groove back either way. But coming back from this concussion, over his last 8 games, he's scored in double figures in all of them, which I know is kind of a pedestrian achievement by what you would expect from him. But still, it's the first time he's done that in a Boston uniform. He's averaging 16.5 points, nearly 60% shooting along the way. He's not Utah Hayward, so let's not be foolish. There's all that, is he back, is he back? To me, he's not back, but he is confident, he's aggressive, he's explosive. What percentage of that all-star do you believe he is right now going into the playoffs?
I think he's a different player. And again, what you said about him not being back, or is that's what everybody was asking him. And it's like, back to what? Because the Utah Hayward isn't what you're looking for. He has to be a different player. He was, completely ball dominant when he was in Utah, and that's not going to be the case here. But again, I fall back to the same thing about getting Indiana in the first round. And again, maybe that's be careful what you wish for, but there was a scenario by which, what did you want to see from the Celtics in the last couple of weeks? You want to see Marcus Morris start hitting some shots again. That happened a little bit, towards the end of the year. But number one on the top of that list, and Max loves this one because it was something I said at the trade deadline when the Celtics didn't make a move. I said the Celtics at the trade deadline, the best move they can make. They had the chance to make a better move than anybody else in the league. Toronto got Marc Gasol, and Indiana got Wes Matthews, and teams got better. They got guys. The Celtics, the biggest move they can make, get Gordon Hayward. And they did. So the Celtics probably added the biggest talent when you think about it, with a healthy Gordon Hayward.
Okay, so we talked about Hayward's 8-game run. During Al Horford's last 8, though, which have not been the same 8 games, he's rested for a few. He's averaging about 19 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. His shooting splits are ridiculous, 58, 46, 90. He's been incredibly efficient all year. Looks like playoff Al, as the cliche goes, just in time. What's led to him getting so locked in? Because for a good chunk of the season, he did not look like himself. He was clearly bothered by that knee, and somewhere along the line, as the saying has gone for this team, he has flipped a switch.
I think he, obviously, number one, as you said, he wasn't healthy, and that makes a big difference. In the end, we talk about this all the time. The other night when Terry Rozier was sick. Like, imagine when you go to work feeling sick, right, and you're not quite yourself. Now imagine doing that and you're trying to guard an NBA point guard or something. I mean, it's a big difference when a player goes from 100% health to 90 or 80% health. But I also think Al was managing not so much his game and his effort, but his body, so he could be in this physical shape going into the playoffs. Like all this stuff that we talk about, when you lose game 31 and it's a bad loss and you're like, oh, Al Horford didn't play in that game and he rested and the Celtics needed to win because they're not playing well right now. There's a reason a lot of these games were strategic rest and whatever, and Al was the primary guy. Al is the perfect example of a player who is just far more efficient now playing 65 to 70 games than 82.
Boston's won 5 out of 7 since that 4-game skid, and like you said earlier, you can kind of put the line of demarcation wherever you want. I think some of the players more recently would put it there because Horford pointed to a focus, a sense of urgency to kind of get them where they are, and now they have a little bit of time to prepare for Indiana. But also helps that Kyrie Irving really hasn't had a stinker since that late February loss in Toronto. Now he's getting ready for his first playoff run with the Celtics after having to watch last year. He had a few in Cleveland, won a title with the Cavs, as we know, hit arguably the biggest shot in NBA Finals history. Celtics, though, as a team, and you mentioned this earlier, they've largely gone as Kyrie's mood has gone, and so fortunately seems about as happy as he's been all year. He's not afraid of the spotlight, but is he prepared to lead this team now?
Well, what I love the most is that Kyrie has set the bar for himself. He spent the entire year talking about leadership, talking about how he can score when he wants to, and talking about being focused on the playoffs. And I like a guy who's he hasn't shied away from that. He's kind of set the bar for himself very high. And generally speaking, the harder things are for Kyrie, he's a guy who runs faster uphill, if you know what I mean. When the tougher it gets, the better he has been. And again, the number that I like to use is that great example of that home road thing. Why the Celtics, what gives them the puncher's chance to pull this off somehow and win these series on the road is that when Kyrie Irving doesn't play last year, we saw the Celtics can win at home and they can't win on the road. When Kyrie does play, the record is almost identical at home and on the road. It's irrelevant. Which doesn't make any sense in the NBA when home teams win, nearly 70% of the games. But the Celtics are the same home team that they are a road team because Kyrie is unaffected. When you think about hitting that biggest shot, it was one shot. It was a one shot on the road in Game 7 of the NBA Finals because it doesn't matter to Kyrie. And that's what, for the Celtics to do what we're talking about them possibly doing, there are going to be some, Kyrie is going to add to his legacy significantly here because he's going to have some vintage moments, particularly on the road. You've
said you expect the Celtics to win this series. I agree with you. Prediction. What are you looking at? How many games?
Yeah, I think to me it's more the way. I think the smart money right now is that the Celtics show them they can win and win easily at Indiana. They haven't been great at home this year, so I think Game 1 might be the most important one in some ways. If the Celtics get Game 1, I think this is going to be a short series. I'm not a big. This will happen in 5 and this will happen in 6. Mm-hmm. I think if you're forcing me up against a wall, I think the safest play probably is Celtics in 5. I would not be surprised if the Pacers make it a long series and they're very capable of doing it. I think that will tell you, as I said, what you want to know or maybe what you didn't want to know about the Celtics. That if this goes 7, it's going to be very difficult for the Celtics going forward. I would hardly be shocked beyond shock if the Celtics sweep this series. And that just has to do with the Pacers. It's about that third game there. And if the Celtics find a way in that third game, that reality sets in that Indiana they were putting a great year together. Their best player got hurt. And again, going back to the Celtics without Rondo in 2013, that as impressive as the wins they put together in the regular season are, to win in the playoffs without Oladipo is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, I hope you're right with 5. I would have thought the safe play for most people, and we'll see what all the expert predictions are when those start to come out during the week. I would have thought most people would say Celtics in 6 maybe would be the most common safe play. But
that generally is. People always go with the be safer and go to the middle, but then something happens in a series and it goes the other way. As I said, I'll tell you. Here's what I predict: the Celtics will win the series, and then you're going to have people irrationally optimistic about Milwaukee.
They're going to sweep them.
They're going to. The Celtics are rolling now. They got it back. They're going to go to Milwaukee and win those.
Well, just wait. If the Celtics win in 5,
beat Milwaukee in a 7-game series, but nobody is understanding. And they beat in 2010, the year we're comparing this to, right?
Yeah.
They beat the best team in the second round, and that was LeBron with many crazy things going on off the court with that Cavs team, and there was a lot of issues, and the Celtics found a way to beat, that was the best player in the world at that time. They're going to face the best player in the world at this time in the second round. And again, LeBron 2010 is better certainly than Giannis in 2019, but that team is playing remarkably well together. And yes, they haven't done it. And yes, the Celtics could put pressure on them. And yes, the Celtics can beat Milwaukee in a 7-game series. But this idea of bring on Milwaukee, let's get the Bucks, bring them on, is you're not paying attention.
No, your roadmap to irrational optimism, I'll draw it up for you now. It's the Celtics winning in 5 with a couple of blowouts, one comfortable win, one tight win, and a narrow loss. And then the Bucks being forced to go to 6 games, and most of them are close.
Right.
Then you'll have the Celtics fans and less so national media probably, except for headlines and talk shows. But at that point, you'll have the Celtics fans in full force. That they beat the Bucks last year without Irving, without Hayward. They're going to do it again now that they're healthy.
Exactly. And obviously the biggest, the Celtics are a completely different day from last year. The Bucks certainly are. From the head coach to the best player getting better to the role players to Brook Lopez to Splash Mountain hitting threes now when he didn't take one the first 9 years he was in the league. I mean, all of this stuff is – I'm not saying you can't beat Milwaukee. I'm saying that I am of the stance here. If you want your hot take, here's the hot take.
Sure,
we need a headline. Milwaukee's going to win the championship, but I would not be betting the house against Milwaukee winning the whole thing. That's how strongly I feel about it. They could lose to the Celtics in the second round. Of course they could, but it would not be shocking to me that this group at the top of the league has been Milwaukee, Golden State, Toronto all year. Obviously, Houston's in that conversation now, but and I think Boston is that spoiler on the outside of those three. But those three teams have been the best teams all year. And the Celtics are the one that could make noise. If it's not going to be one of those three, it's because Boston maybe, or 4 if you include Houston. If a fifth team is going to get in there, it would be the Celtics. But have no illusions that in a year in which we talk about the Celtics all the time, Toronto's had this great year and everyone's afraid of them. Golden State's a defending champ, so everyone thinks is going to win. Houston is considered the team that has the best chance to knock them off. In the year with all those things happening, Milwaukee has been the clear-cut best team start to finish.
Sean, I could subject you to a couple of Twitter questions, or I could let you call it a day as an expression that will also make me sound old that most people will not get of a certain generation. It's your dime.
Well, why don't we do this again in a couple of weeks and see if we were right?
I look forward to it. Let's do that. We'll take some questions then, and in the meantime, we'll enjoy listening to the call.
All right, my friend.
Sean Grande, radio voice of the Celtics across the Celtics radio network, always enjoyable. And, had been a while since he'd been on the show. I think going back to early season, maybe even the summertime. I'm not sure. But we will do it again, and maybe even a couple of weeks, and dissect this matchup with the Pacers and hopefully look ahead or start to paint a miserable eulogy for this team. But want to tell you, today's show brought to you by betonline.ag. Get a 50% bonus on your first deposit by going to betonline.ag/CelticsBeat and use the promo code CLNS50 at checkout. Today's show also brought to you in part by Robinhood. Robinhood's giving listeners a free stock to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at Celtics.Robinhood.com. I already told you my prediction for this series when it begins Saturday or Sunday, whichever one it is. Celtics in 6. Sean says Celtics in 5. I say Celtics in 6. Bottom line is we just hope the Celtics win no matter how many games it takes, but get it over with quicker, of course. That's better for rest going into the next round and all the different things that I could ramble on about that, you're not an idiot. Thanks again to Sean, to my producer, Evan Valenti, and thanks especially to him for filling in the last couple of weeks while I was on vacation. I was often in the happiest place on earth. At least that's what my T-shirt said, and they took all my money at Disney. So can't wait to do it again. Thanks to Nick, to Larry, to John, everyone else at CLNS Media, most of all you. We welcome your feedback. You can get me on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman. We will talk plenty between now and the end of this postseason run, and then get into the summer and draft and free agency and all that. But hopefully that is a ways away from having to detail any of that stuff. I know some of you are obsessed with the draft pick watch. I don't even care about it right now. I really don't. It is not on my radar. The playoffs, we've been talking about the playoffs all year. Will they flip a switch? Well, now we're about to find out once we do it again. Thanks to Nick, to Larry, to John, everyone else at CLNS Media, most of all you. We welcome your feedback. You can get me on Twitter, at Adam M. Kaufman. We will talk plenty between now and the end of this postseason run, and then get into the summer and draft and free agency and all that. But hopefully that is a ways away from having to detail any of that stuff. I know some of you are obsessed with the draft pick watch. I don't even care about it right now. I really don't. It is not on my radar. The playoffs, we've been talking about the playoffs all year. Will they flip a switch? Well, now we're about to find out once we get through one truly meaningless regular season game that you guys are going to play in. Although I wouldn't be shocked if Gordon Hayward plays just to continue to build confidence, get another 20-point game under his belt, and just stay loose. Unless they fear injury, in which case he's not going to go near the game, won't even travel. So Either way, we'll find out. Subscribe to Celtics Beat on iTunes. Subscribe to CLNS on YouTube as well for a lot of great sound and content there. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of Geno time at the Garden on the horizon. I hope so.
Hello, I'm Dan Lothian, host of the Behind the Media podcast on the CLNS